Across Canada, businesses are closing not because they're doing bad in business, but because they're having to pay back loans given by the government that were supposed to be relief for COVID. Joining me today is Dave. Dave is my local neighborhood tool guy, and you're going through the same struggle as many other Canadian businesses are going through right now. You run a tool truck business, bringing retail items to people right at their shop right where they work. Tell me what's happened to your business over this whole thing, CEBA, I guess they're calling it.
Well, to be honest, my business didn't struggle the first year and a bit. As long as we had supply in our warehouses, we were okay. But once that supply wore through, we started seeing it was taking 3 months to get a part, 3 months to get a tool. And that definitely, as a salesperson, if you can't sell the product, you don't make money.
Mm-hmm.
So when around 2020, I think it was in January or February, I was just in my bank account and I saw $40,000 in an account. And so I phoned the bank because I was like, what's going on with this? I knew about the CEBA, but I hadn't even applied for it at that
Well,
point.
explain what is CEBA.
So it's supposed to help small businesses get through COVID. I mean, it was majority for businesses with employees that had to lay employees off. Any business that was affected by COVID and the shutdown of pretty much all the industrial lines. For me, I sell tools in Whistler, so the complete mountain shut down. So this was supposed to help us, boost us up and get us through these tough times,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm sure it did help a lot of businesses at the time. Um, so when I essentially saw this money in my bank account and was like, what's going on? I talked to my accountant. They're like, well, why don't you phone the bank and find out the deal? So I phoned the bank and they're like, this is the federal government. They've given you this $40,000 to help you get through COVID. And I'm like, well, what's the terms? And she's like, well, essentially you get 40, you have to pay back 30 at the end of the year. And I was like, okay, so do I qualify? I don't have employees, but my business was definitely affected by COVID. I mean, my kids would get sick with COVID, so I'd be off work. You know, I didn't have the supply chains were slowing down. I wasn't getting parts delivered at the right time. So it did affect my business the first year, but not massively, right? It was probably in the third year that it really started to hurt us
Right,
in the
because
tool
of
business.
the slowdown in the supply chains.
Supply
It takes
chain just
time.
halted.
Yeah, these
I mean,
things take time.
our warehouses went to rotate. Like our warehouses run 24 hours a day. They went down to one shift, so they just weren't manufacturing at the rate they were before COVID.
Right.
And obviously, people were getting COVID, and they were staying home. If you had the sniffles, you stayed home, and that affected the supply chains. So they kept. So I understood that, and I was a bit weary. Like honestly, like that's why I phoned them and was like, "Look, do I qualify this?" I went through a process with the Royal Bank. They're like, this, and this. Yeah, you qualify, sir. Spend the money. This is the federal government helping you out. I was still a bit weary, so essentially, I put out of that 40, I put 30 into account and just let it sit there, and I used the $10,000 to buy more supply.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Perfect. And so then another year went by, and they kept postponing the deadline. Well, actually, so I think 3 months later, there was a top up. So if you were a business and you needed more, they'd give you an extra 20,000, so a total of 60,000, but you'd only have to pay 10 of that. So borrow 60, pay back 40, which is huge for people. That was $20,000, right? I didn't qualify for that. I got a letter in the mail saying I didn't qualify for that. So at that time again, I phoned back to the Royal Bank. So do I still qualify for this $40,000 one? They're like, yes, sir, no problem. Go ahead, use that money. Again, I didn't use it. I kept the 30 because I didn't want to have to pay it back all of a sudden at the end of the year whenever it was due. And,
Mm-hmm.
I spent the 10. So another year goes by. They moved the deadline to another year. And so this year, about a month ago, I got a letter saying that I owe all 40 of that loan.
All of
And
it.
I didn't call all of it. Yeah. Due December 31st, 2023.
So they changed their mind on your
Yeah.
ability to collect it
Yeah.
in the first place, even though
And
you
like
never asked for it.
I never asked for it. I never even signed papers for that money. Like this was just money put into my bank account. So I'm not sure how other people went through it. Like I do have other friends that took it and they definitely signed some papers. Some did, some didn't. But majority of the people, the money just showed up in their account. Okay?
That's unreal.
It is. We was during a pandemic, so there was a bunch of unreal things happening during that time, right? So I was just like, I was a bit weary because the government always has something's going to get you from the back end. So right? So I just kept going and I kept that 30,000. Well, now I got to pay back that 40,000. So in the next month or two, I got to come up with $10,000 at the end of the year where tax season's due and all this stuff, right? So I'm a little stressed out about it. And, luckily for me, I'm going to be able to make it and I'm going to have that money. And originally the loan was supposed to be 0%. So you borrow that money and when the payback, it was going to be 0%. You pay it back within a 5-year term.
Right.
Now it's at 5%. I think they said it was.
Right. So the Bank of Canada rates 5% at the moment.
Yeah. So they changed. They changed what they changed what they originally set out to do. They made up rules as they went. And I figure it's because it's a pandemic, and they're saying, well, it was the pandemic. We were just trying things, and that's how they're getting away with it. But yeah, and like I said, I never signed a contract. Never once did I sign a contract.
That's unbelievable. Now I have this story here from the Global News saying popular Vancouver restaurant closes due to pandemic recovery. Now they were given 60 grand and they basically they're in a position where they couldn't pay it back. They're told you got to pay this back and they had to shutter their doors. And that was it. And I'm talking about a popular place, like a place that had no shortage of business. But it's the government came in with the problem in the first place with the pandemic. Largely, I mean, there's going to be a lot of arguing back and forth whether what they did was the right thing to do or not. But they had this benefit that they brought out for businesses to say, okay, here you go. But then now they're reneging on it. Now they're reneging on this whole concept and saying you got to pay this all back. And like I said, this is such a crazy story for your business because again, you didn't even ask for it. You didn't ask for this money. Now, have you spoken to lawyers or anything? Like, if you didn't sign anything, are you really under any obligations?
I reached out to a lawyer and they said, no, if you never sign anything, you're not even obligated to pay back the 40,000. But she said you could be audited every single year. They could blacklist you, and you're going to have a fight on. And for me, is it worth that fight? Probably not, right? Because I'll have to pay lawyer fees, and then it'll just cost me more money. And at the end, the government wins. It's I just don't feel like I'll win that one.
No.
I did reach out to my local MLA, and to be honest, we have a liberal MLA, and she was amazing. She got my information down. She said, well, because so I phoned right away. As soon as I got the letter saying I owe the whole 40,000, I'm like, well, like, why? Like, you said I qualified, and I got a line. So I phoned the bank. The bank's like, look, I'm just a middleman. We're just here to collect the money. We don't approve it. We don't do anything. The federal government approves it. And I'm like, well, you got to have a number for me. And so I ended up getting a number for them. So I phoned this number, and it was literally, I'm guessing some lady at her house because I could hear dogs in the backyard. The TV was on, and she's like, look, there's just nothing. You have to pay the money back. I'm like, well, like, can you tell me why I didn't qualify? She's like, no, there's no appealing it. You just got to pay the money back. Like, so I'm like, you're just like the hangman then? Like, you're just the one taking all the punches? She's like, yeah, pretty much. Pay back the money. There was nothing. Yeah, nothing. No, and she's like, yeah. So then and she's like, maybe call your local MLA if you have a problem with it. So I did. And again, I didn't get a hold of my MLA. I got hold of the secretary.
Right.
And she was amazing. She's like, look, we're going to get right onto this. And we're going to, I want your company. She sent me an email within 10 minutes saying, I want your company name, blah, blah, blah. And I'll see if I can get it resolved. I waited on it a bit because I talked to my lawyer, and she's like, well, you give them your company name. There might be some payback. Who knows? So she's like, you have the money, just pay it back. And just move on. And essentially that's what I'm doing. But it hurts me every time I see, like, I'm struggling now because, supply lines have started to come back online, but I still, like, you can look at my revenue. It's gone down in the last 2 years, right? I'm not making the same amount of money I was 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it just hurts when you see them give all this money away to everybody else but Canadians, like it's insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't make any sense.
Every weekend it seems that there's a new pet project for the Canadian government overseas to give away billions and billions of dollars, whether it's to corporate welfare or if it's relief for poverty in other countries. We're seeing a lot of poverty here in our country, and
Sure.
I'd like to see some relief for Canadians, especially Canadian entrepreneurs, business people. Dave, thank you so much for joining me today and bringing
no
this
problem, Clyde. My
story
pleasure.
to I want to still be able to get tools from you in the future, and that would be
100%. You will.
well,
Yeah,
as long as you can get a supply of those things, and that's really
it's
where it
true.
comes down to. So,
The company I work for is a very strong company, and they have been helping us, and they are trying to get it dealt with. Yeah. So we'll keep going until we can't.
well, it's good that you had this fiscal responsibility to look at the situation.
Well, I don't trust the government, Clyde. That's the only reason. But a lot of people did. A lot of people did, and now they're getting stung with it, right?
Yeah, so unfortunate. Dave, thanks again
Yeah.
for joining me today.
Thanks, Clyde.